welcome to you all. Welcome to the ACU. We are extremely lucky to have with us here today two giants in their field, Rajesh, Tandon and Prof Hall, co-chairs of the UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education. Rajesh is the founding president of the Society for Participatory Research in Asia, PRIA, and a major figure in the global civil society movement. He was co-founder of Civicus, among many other important spaces for social movement and civil society reflection. He's a pioneer of participatory research with over 40 years of practical work in multiple sectors of social change in India and beyond. And he's the author of more than 100 books and articles. And the ACU also has a very special connection with Rajesh, as we have the privilege of administering the Martha Farrell Memorial Fellowship in memory of Rajesh's late wife, herself a considerable civil society leader, renowned for her work on women's rights, gender equality and adult education. And the fellowship offers a staff member from an ACU member university training and support to introduce an anti-sexual harassment initiative in their home universities. That's hugely important work. Bud Hall is Professor of Community Development at the University of Victoria in Canada. His roots in participatory research go back to the early 70s when he was working at the Institute for Adult Education at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. He's worked with Rajesh in various settings for 40 years, and he has served as the Secretary General of ICAI, the International Council for Adult Education. In the university world, he's been a chair of adult education, a dean of education, and the founder of the Office for Community-Based Research at the University of Victoria. His research is in the areas of social movement learning, knowledge democracy, community-based research, and higher education and social responsibility. And we're delighted that Rajesh and Bud will speak today about the changing understanding of knowledge, the contemporary discourses of social innovation, and the implications of these evolving concepts for higher education and the attainment of the SDGs. And they'll also update us on their latest initiative, the Knowledge for Change Global Consortium on Training for Participatory Research. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to our speakers, and there will be plenty of time for discussion and questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Alex, and Liberty, who's departed. Thank you, Liberty. We flipped the coin and I lost, so I go first. We could do it the other way around. Let's see how it works. If it ends up that you didn't like the order or you didn't like our discourses, we can change. We work together a lot, so we're quite interchangeable in terms of some of our thinking. It's great to be here at the headquarters of the ACU. The ACU in 2011, with its declaration on engagement, university engagement, was really in the forefront of this whole area, which is called community university engagement, or here in UK particularly public engagement in higher education, and the kind of work that the ACU has been doing in this regard is very widely respected. Rajesh and I have been working with the ACU actively in this kind of file, the engagements, since 2009, the UNESCO World Conference on Higher Education, and we we've enjoyed the partnership very much. We, as Liberty was saying, that we're part of a small group of people that is kind of an engaged, I don't know what, a community, I think it's called, which we never ever met, so we engage by a long distance, as is often the case in international work. I'm in addition to the nice things that Alex said, I'm a settler Canadian, and my great-grandparents immigrated from Staffordshire via a long circuitous route to the island of Vancouver Island, where the city of Victoria is located, and I am now living and working in that city of Victoria, and I won't go into the whole story, but suffice it to say is that my ability to be here is I've benefited directly from the taking of land by my great-grandparents of First Nations land, the Hallalt First Nations on the island that I come from. In 2011, I wrote an article with the title "Towards a Knowledge Democracy Movement," and it had a question mark behind it. This is for a journal, the Rizoma Freriano, a journal out of Seville. And there I was asking the question about whether a global knowledge democracy movement was emerging. And I defined a global knowledge democracy in the following ways. An action-oriented formation that recognizes, gives visibility to, and strengthens knowledge that is created in the context of, as Marx once said, people trying to change the world. A global knowledge movement would recognize, value, and support the recovery and deepening of indigenous ways of knowing. A global knowledge movement would recognize the epistemic privilege of homeless themselves as a key to taking action on issues of homelessness. It would celebrate the intellectual contributions of young people who are differently abled. It would honor the early work of people like Engels, who gathered insights of workers themselves in the 19th century factories of Manchester, or Marx's own work in the Mosel River Valley, learning from workers in the vineyards. It would recognize that the gay and lesbian movement and the HIV/AIDS movements have been built fundamentally on the knowledge of gay and lesbian citizens themselves. I continued to note that a knowledge movement, or a movement that uses knowledge as a key mobilizing and organizing strategy, is centered within the lives and places of those who are seeking recognition of their rights, their land claims, their access to jobs, to ecological justice, recovery and retention of their languages. Knowledge itself within such a movement formation is most likely place-based and rooted in the daily lives of people who increase their knowledge of their own context, and by sharing what they are learning with allies and others like themselves, they move, as Paulo Freire once said, towards being agents in the naming of the world. In 2012, UNESCO asked Rajesh and I to think about submitting a proposal to create a UNESCO chair, which we did. We only had one stipulation, and that's that instead of creating one chair, they create a chair with 2 seats. And so they thought about that. They sent it out to design architects and various people, had a committee, international committee to be sure, made up of NGOs and government representatives, and I'm surprised ICA wasn't involved. Anyway, they agreed to creating, as far as we know, the first chair that has two representatives. Why did we do that? We did that because the chair is in what we call community-based participatory research, and the last part, social responsibility in higher education. But for those of all of us in this room, many of whom I see Serena right there, all of us who know about this kind of work, it's about community and academics working together, co-constructing knowledge. And we thought it would be invidious to have a chair, particularly a chair that had just Bud in it. And so it wouldn't have been invidious to have a chair with just Rajesh. But we thought the two of us together, not only do we like each other, we work well together, but there's a certain symbolic function to the construction, in that Rajesh is based in a civil society research organization in the Global South, and I'm based in a university in the Global North. We have, in those days, this, we basically are, we were really coming back to work that we started out, in the 1970s. We were involved in setting up the first participatory research network in 1977. And we worked on that for a number of years till we thought that the concept was grown up enough to defend itself in the world, and it has proven so. But then we went off doing other things. Rajesh stayed at Priya, moving through a whole series of interesting engagements with society and social change, and I moved through different aspects of university life, different kinds of leadership roles, some more more fun than others, and then in 2007, our University of Victoria was asked, our Vice President for Research asked to create an Office of Community-Based Research to facilitate co-creation of knowledge. And they asked me if I would get it started, which I was very happy to do so. One of the things we discovered at UVic, and many of you who've been based in institutions will know, is that senior people in universities are quite risk averse. They like to be seen to be innovative, but not too innovative. And they don't want to they want to be seen kind of just ahead of the pack, but not way ahead of the pack, because they're afraid that somebody, somebody from some other university or group of university, God forbid, the Russell Group or something, will look at their university and say, wow, University of Victoria, what the hell are you doing? You've really lost the track. We're not doing that anymore. Or we never were meant, that's not our role. So we decided in Canada that we better we better get a little support group. You know how, when you're having trouble in life, sometimes the support group is helpful. We have different kinds of, things that are going on. We need some. So we thought to help our administrators to survive the trauma of having to engage with communities in a new way. So we created a national body called Community-Based Research Canada. And then we found that something that many of you know, Alan Tuckett knows it very well, is that the international can be really wonderful as a way of strengthening local action. It's not just a matter, it's not just to be able to go travel around someplace, and Alex certainly knows that, but you can use the fact that something is happening somewhere else, bring that person there, or just bring their papers, or show a video of that work, and your local people think, well, Bud didn't know what he was talking about, but Alan, listen to Alan, he's so articulate. So, we realized that the global networking is a very important function to strengthen the willpower of people in universities who want to create these kinds of this new architecture of knowledge that's going on. We hadn't heard at that time, when we first got started, we hadn't heard anything about the work of people like Boaventura de Sousa Santos, or Shiv Viswanathan, or Felix Bivens, or Ernest Dussel, so many other people who've brought us these wonderful concepts like epistemicide. Anybody ever heard that word? A few of you have, probably. Some of you have been subjected to some of our articles. But epistemicide, created by Boaventura de Sousa Santos, a Portuguese sociologist, is the idea that as Western knowledge sort of expanded, with the various kind of empires and attempts at empire navigation and so forth in the 16th, 17th centuries, it eliminated or killed off knowledge systems that were already existing, and we all. Coming from Canada, we're very aware of that in terms of indigenous knowledge systems. But this is something. So we began thinking about this idea of knowledge democracy, and so for us, knowledge democracy is several things. One is the recognition of multiple epistemologies, multiple ways of knowing the world, and including indigenous, but not only indigenous, including situated knowledges of people who are living a particular experience. I mentioned in my notes homelessness. Nobody knows the tricks and the trades of surviving, living rough, than people who are living rough. And yet, how many people are doing studies all around London, all around Victoria, all around everybody, trying to imagine what it must be like, occasionally getting an interview and doing all this stuff. And we have very seldom have panels of experts made up of people who are sleeping rough. So people who are differently abled have extraordinary insights into their situations, and all kinds. These are excluded knowledges. These are not the kinds of these are not the kinds of knowledges that typically are found in the curricula of universities. So knowledge democracy, first of all, is about broadening our palette of colors, broadening our palette of knowledge, of epistemologies available. Second thing knowledge democracy is about representing knowledge in very different ways. All of us who've either been a student in the university, learned how to write academic papers, or God forbid ended up with a career as an academic, you know how narrow the world of knowledge representation can be, and how hard it is to do some of that work, and how few people actually give a damn about what you've done. They don't even read it. They don't even read it. And we also know that that's not the way that knowledge is shared in outside of academia. How we ended up this way, it's another story. But in communities, people share through theater, through dance, through meetings, through paintings, through murals, through poetry, through song, through video, through making films, through writing community newspapers, all kinds of things. And so knowledge democracy for us is that when there is, when you've got knowledge, participatory, contextually specific knowledge, that it can be shared in other ways. A third element is to remind those of us who are deeply interested in transformative change, social movements, is that knowledge, that piece of whatever, this kind of human activity, that knowledge is a really important tactical part of building a movement. And that a movement that is not self-conscious about what is learning about itself, what it is learning about the rest of the world, through interaction with that world, will not go forward. And this is a contribution of, this is where the kind of the theoretical work of adult educators and their interest in social movement learning. We've got four right here, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the best ones I know actually who worked on these issues. This is a huge contribution that none of the social movement theorists, the sociologists, or the political scientists, or a lot of the other people who study social movement, they don't get it. They haven't got it. They describe it, it's organizational, it's all this and that and the other thing, politics. Most social movements fail from a political, from the point of view of achieving. But they don't fail because through the life of those movements, people's, our ability to understand transformations in power around gender, around humanity and the rest of nature and so forth changes. So that's the third one. See, that's only 3. I've only got 2 more to go. No, only 1 more to go. So 1 more is open access. Open access. So if we're going to produce stuff together, let's, for heaven's sakes, not produce it and put it in a book that, that nobody can afford. Not even a Canadian scholar can afford all these darn books. There's a lot of books published these days. And I remember going to Uganda with this big book. Rajesh and I did a fabulous book for Palgrave on knowledge engagement and the role of higher education and social change. We had a whole bunch of book launches, and I was on the Uganda one, and I brought 4 or 5. They're very heavy, by the way. Palgrave produced them, and a bunch of flyers that Palgrave had given me with big, deep discounts. So I gave the 4 away, to the minister and the principal and blah 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 blah. And then I gave out, and everybody said, "Oh, that sounds like a great book. How can I get one?" So I gave them all the flyer. The discount was $80 US. That's the discount book. The real price was $100. And you could see the face. Anyway, so Rajesh and I have become later day. Oh, you're always more passionate later day. What do you call it? Newly converted. Anyway, open access we think is an important way to go. And so we are all of our work is open access. All our books, everything is all open access, and it always will. And we think with due respect to all of the scholars who have published market priced books, that's okay. But let's start thinking about, piece by piece by piece, or let's get the publishers. There are some publishers who publish both a hard copy that you buy and the soft copy, and they found that having the free one actually increases sales of the hard one. So that's all that's about. So I just want to turn to one last thing before I turn over to Rajesh. Remember I started saying, back in 2011, is there something kind of knowledge democracy movement? And my answer today is yes. And it's evolving, in lots of very interesting ways. And since I've been, in the last few months here in London, I've been meeting up with lots of very interesting, people who are moving all of this forward, including Jude Fransman and Kate Newman, Jude from the Open University and Kate from Christian Aid, who've done this very interesting work on partnerships, community NGO partners, very sophisticated, good work on co-constructing knowledge and the ethics and the principles involved in that, and their work is continuing. It's very exciting. I've had a chance to meet with Sojung Rim. Is Sojung here? There, I see her. Yes, hi Sojung. Sojung is a key leader in a very interesting organization. It's called the Social Innovation Exchange, and you know that London is the world. This is the headquarters for the Social Innovation Exchange, and if you go over to see their office, it's in an old church, and downstairs is a bunch of couches and things. I think it's an organization that works on prison. What is it, Soja? The other organization you're building?
It's called Only Connect. It's a criminal justice.
Criminal justice. Okay, so up around the balcony of the former church that's the headquarters of Social Innovation Exchange, and tables and chairs and a little couch area, and here are these movers and shakers working all across the globe on creating this new kinds of spaces. Social innovation is this discourse we hear a lot about. We're not always sure exactly what it means, but from my visit with Sojung and reading some of the work that they're doing, it's a very interesting progressive agenda that goes along very much with our agenda of new kinds of relationships between creators and sharers and actors in knowledge. So the social innovation goes beyond kind of the knowledge dimension, but the key elements, the key principles of social innovation. Another very interesting organization that has come up in the last couple of years is one called Africans Rising for Justice, Peace, and Dignity, and they have created, and this is an African civil society movement. Africa is, of all the continents, the continent that is, whether it's from an economic neoliberal perspective or an NGO, a civil society perspective, the most colonized of any of the continents. And there is, as there always has been, there's now a growing kind of Pan-African movement. This time it's called Africans Rising, and they have a very powerful. It's called the Kilimanjaro Declaration, that says that Africans have a rich, powerful heritage of knowledge. It is important to heal ourselves and repair the damage done by neoliberalism to our humanity and environment. I think Alex mentioned that Rajesh is one of the founders of Civicus. Civicus has created, Civicus is the global sort of civil society umbrella organization. And Civicus has created a knowledge platform, a social movement, knowledge democracy platform that they call Data Shift. And they have learned that in that world, that civil society world, there are remarkable lessons being learned, and you don't have to wait till somebody from a university comes along, so what have you been doing lately, and you get all of your work translated into kind of abstract language. They have created a knowledge platform, a digitized knowledge platform, to be able to share knowledge within, within those, amongst the members of CIVA. It's open to others. If you're interested, you can dig it up. It's called, as I said, Data Shift. There's one more that I was looking for here. The Greenpeace has, anyway, Greenpeace is also, anybody know the Greenpeace Knowledge Platform in here? No, not yet. Anyway, look it up, it's a good one. It's another one, it's similar knowledge platform. So what I'm saying is that there is a, whether you're talking about the, the kind of work that is sprung up thanks to that 2011 Engage Declaration of the ACU, University, or the public engagement sort of discourse, or the CBPR, kind of discourse, or the CCPH in the US, or all of these networks. There really is it's a fascinating time to be interested in the ways, the new ways in which knowledge is being understood, and I would suggest ways in which knowledge is being taken, is being liberated, from the constraints of academic modes of production. So. What do you think? Should I stop? All right, that's it. Sir.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to stand up for a couple of reasons. One, I have flown in overnight from New Delhi. And two, I like to see your faces. That will give me feedback when I should shut up. Thank you very much for the introduction, Alex, for giving this opportunity for our friendship and partnership. Let me tell you very quickly how I have reached here. I grew up in a family of teachers in a city which was then called the Manchester of India, the city of Kanpur, which if you go to the museum in Manchester, it still has textile machinery from Kanpur. It was a city which was industrialized during the two wars, primarily to provide parachutes and small machine guns and boots for the army fighting the World War I and II. I was privileged, having born in a family of teachers and mothers and aunts who were educated, to go to college and university. And I started my career as a lecturer in a school of management in Calcutta. And in order to advance my career, if education was going to be, higher education was going to be my vocation, you needed to do a little PhD. And I landed up in a university in the US, in a school of management, learning PhD things. While I was there, political emergency was declared in India by Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So you can imagine how long ago it was. And having come from a family of teachers who were also periodic agitators in the freedom movement, the little bug was there, and I found a way out. American universities are very good, at least at that time. So I told my committee that I want to do field work for my dissertation in India. That was the most legitimate way to get back and still complete PhD. And I ended up through fortuitous set of circumstances, including meeting people like Chris Duke, who were part of the adult education movement, Alan and Bud and Darlene, others know very well, and went to work in a part of rural India which was primarily comprised of indigenous communities doing marginal agriculture. And because I was doing my PhD, I was well-trained. My first degree was in electronics engineering. So I had computer packages even at that time ready for pre and post measures. But having spent a year, I realized two things. And one, that illiterate people were knowledgeable. It was a partial blow to my heavy-duty professional education. At that time, I was the most professionally qualified person in 500-kilometer radius of that area. Institute of Technology, electronics degree, most of my fellows habited Silicon Valley. Institute of Management, Calcutta, lecturer, about to complete PhD in management from US. And yet, illiterate people were knowledgeable. And two, that despite my superior professional education and my training in research methodology, including playing with numbers, my pre and post measures were doing nothing. Most of the time people ran away when I opened my instrument. It was almost like I pulled out my sword. Till one day, an old farmer caught hold of me and said, "Son, you look troubled." I said, "Yes." "Why?" He said, I'm not getting data. And it's only 2 months left, I have to return. And the whole year I've been spending with you guys only in search of data. And I told him, "Look, I told you when I came in the beginning that other than helping you guys and, helping run some workshops and field visits for you, training, I'm also doing my PhD. I was very candid with you, He said, yeah, I remember. But why are you not getting data? I said, look, I got this questionnaire and I ask people, they don't give any information. I ask them how many children they have. They say, well, maybe 5. But what is all this? So he said, can you see? You mean, I said, eyes, yeah. Yeah. Can you hear? I said, yeah. Can you taste? Can you smell? Can you touch? I said, yes. All those are working. He said, then use them. Huh? Have you observed change? Have you smelled change? Have you felt change? Fantastic lesson. Essentially, what the old man taught me was that there were multiple ways of knowing, and we have been trained to stop looking at your other modes of knowing and only use the cognitive gray matter as if that's the only way of knowing. So anyway, I cut the long story short, I did manage to get PhD. So the doctor in front is genuine. But I had great trouble returning to my teaching and research career. I went back because I had agreed to go on study leave and there's a commitment and all, but my heart wasn't there. And I decided to go back and work. In between, of course, I bumped into Bud 40 years ago, and he had started talking about participatory research. And you can't complete a scholarly PhD if you don't have a good reference. He provided the reference. So there are 2 people I owe my PhD to. One is Professor Dave Brown, who was chair of my committee, who allowed me to go and do field work, and 2, Dr. Bud Hall, who provided the reference. Because I quoted his paper on participatory research and said there are alternative ways. And I was a student of science, physics, chemistry, mathematics. I didn't know sociology of knowledge or any of that at that time. But I needed a reference. So thank you. So I spent much of my 80s in practicing participatory research, in essentially valuing local experiential practitioner knowledge, adding to that knowledge macro information to combine in a way that those communities could stake claims on their entitlements and rights. So we were, now about 2 years ago, I learned a new concept, who we were. We were knowledge brokers. Nowadays, knowledge broker, broker otherwise smells, brokerage of money, So, but knowledge, modern day knowledge brokers. But we discovered that the process of valuing what people know creates two things. It builds a sense of confidence in who you are. And two, it creates conditions for accepting new knowledge when your existing knowledge is valued. And in a society like ours, when those days, literacy rates were 30, 40, 50%, this was a very important. Women's knowledge, indigenous communities, literacy rates for women even today are less than 70%. So this is what we did in the 80s. And whenever I went and talked to academia in India or anywhere else, they basically say, you are doing a good community development program. Carry on, boy, carry on. So I developed a distaste for academia, but decided to join one. After International Council on Adult Education, and even Darlene, who was an activist, decided to join one. Participatory research, interestingly, in our part of the world, did not gain currency through the academia. It gained currency through practitioners of adult education, community development, human rights education, ecological movement. The whole 1992 Rio Forum brought to the front the fact that indigenous people living in forests and Amazon or wherever around the world, in the indigenous people, fisher folk living with marine life, they had a body of knowledge, and that body of knowledge needed to be respected, valued, and in some way harnessed. So by the end of the 90s, the international development and these kinds of initiatives like the International Literacy Year, the Rio Forum, the Beijing gathering on women's rights, women's knowledge, the whole movement of women's knowledge, all this began to enter academics somehow. And then, as Bud was describing, in 2007, 2008, we got in contact with GUNI, Global University Network for Innovation. And GUNI was producing a higher education reports every 2-3 years. GUNI is a product of the first UNESCO conference on higher education. It was set up in '98 as a small secretariat in Barcelona, but it had membership of universities. And GUNI secretariat was beginning to think about relationship between knowledge and social change. And that's when Bud and I were part of the editorial team, guest editorial team, and we looked around the world. And we invited 70 people to contribute to this from around the world as to how they were producing knowledge that contributed to social change. And what was the relationship between higher education and engaged knowledge production. And that volume, of course, it is prohibitively expensive, as Bud explained, but there are ways to access it, of course. We in India, closer to China, we know all these things. So we began to look at that time also as to who others were talking about engagement and higher education. Around 2007-8 also, if you remember, there was an increasingly growing higher education enrollment happening, particularly in Africa and Asia. today in China, 65 million people are in post-secondary education institutions, 42 million in India. And those numbers are rapidly growing. Same thing is happening in Africa. So on the one hand, massification of higher education is happening. Both public and private resources are being put in higher education institutions. A new generation of students whose parents never went to higher education are being there. But they enter higher education and they feel that they have come to a strange place. Because the curriculum, the pedagogy, does not relate to the realities they are coming from. Sociology in an indigenous community of Eastern India has the same curriculum as that in Chicago. But the student is not the same. The way of teaching sociology is also the same, the pedagogy. So we were looking at who else is talking about engagement, and those were our early days of contact with the ACU. Because with ACU we began to create a big tent platform where we invited all the networks in the world who were looking at engagement of higher education with the real world. Whether engagement in teaching, engagement in research, and we found the LRS network, we found Pascal network, ACU was active, we found GUNI, we found GESA, there were a couple of other networks like this. The Living Knowledge Network in the continent, which was doing the science shop movement. So there were different networks, and we tried to talk to them and bring them on a common platform. The purpose of that was to promote greater engagement of higher education with the real world outside, with society outside. Then we discovered that around 2010, after the 2009 second UNESCO conference in Paris, which Bert referred to, we discovered that engagement was getting back into fashion in higher education. And in a number of universities and countries, vice presidents for engagement were being set up. A position next to the vice chancellor, deputy vice chancellor, or whatever. Different countries have different rectors or provosts or presidents or whatever. But the engagement was only towards one part of the society called industry. So a lot of engagement, these pro-vice chancellor running around industry engagement, doing joint research, internships. Industry was invited to define the curriculum so that students can be employed by them as if they were there to employ them right away. But the rest of the society was not focused on engagement. And the argument that was being made was that, you see, higher education has three mandates: teaching, research, and service. So engagement with society, rest of society, happens through service, where our students go and teach the community how to wash their hands and paint their nails so that they are hygienic. Because our students are knowledgeable and rest of the people are anyway stupid. The focus of engagement, therefore, with society was ghettoized in the service doctrine, while the teaching and research continues untouched. This is the main challenge that we started posing. And we said that engaged higher education must have engaged teaching and engaged research. So participatory research became a methodology or a way of promoting engaged research. 3-4 years ago, the world has changed even further, where the most important teacher left is called Google Guru. All other teachers are irrelevant because all curriculum, all course design, all question papers and their multiple answers are all available on Google. So what does the teacher do in the classroom? His old notes are no longer relevant. While he is reading his old notes, yellow pager, teachers are giving, students are reading the abridged, fresh version of the notes. But the teacher is not equipped to do anything else with the students. And we are saying that can you get your students to learn sociology, chemistry, hydrology, whatever, by engaging in the real world outside? And can your research be such that it contributes to studying of local challenges and providing some new solutions to that? So, as UNESCO chair, 4 years ago we did a study on community university research partnerships. And we were very pleased to come across a large number of respondents from about 72 or 73 countries saying, we are now doing co-construction of knowledge. So we thought that things had moved forward. But later in the questionnaire, there was a question saying, and in your research, who frames the research question? Overwhelmingly, research is framed inside the academia. So what is co-construction? I frame research, I control money for research, I tell you, you answer it, you provide the answer, and we say co-construction. So we started questioning the vocabulary of co-construction without the substance of it. And in 2013, ACU was the first network on higher education which really asked the question to its members and other universities if they had heard about SDGs. Pioneering work that was done, and very good conversation happened. We also started contributing to this. We felt, and this is, ACU got involved way before anybody else talked about it in 2013. Those were the days Sustainable Development Goals were being formulated. And when they were signed off in 2015 September as a Agenda 2030, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, practitioners, civil society organizations, and district level government officials had heard about Sustainable Development Goals more often than academics. So we began to ask the question that how Sustainable Development Goals are going to be achieved. This is a unique global compact. It is universal. Those goals apply to all the countries of the world. They are not just the developing southern country problem. And they provide a larger framework of improvements in the lives of our people around the world. They include not only issues of climate change, health and education and poverty, but also on urbanization, on water, and on partnerships. So that's a reasonably good set of collective commitments. And we are now therefore asking higher education institutions, their associations, their champions, to come to SDGs, to come to support SDGs. And what ways we are saying you can support? First way you can support SDGs is to teach them in your curriculum. However, the difficulty is that SDGs, unlike disciplines in universities, are not neatly siloed. So if you take SDG 5 on gender equality, which discipline of the university will have to study it? Many. Sociology, psychology, gender studies, economics, history, religious studies. Look at the relationship between religion and gender inequality. So we are hoping that if some universities take on SDG 5, that some of their disciplinary silos may get broken. And the same logic we are extending to research for SDGs. It is our belief that sustainable development goals will be achieved in each local context locally. They will not be achieved nationally or globally. Because each of those goals has a local priority, local causality, and local manifestation. So each of those goals require local knowledge to be produced, local solutions to be identified. And governments alone cannot deliver them, so local partnerships have to be built. Our argument is that community-based participatory research can provide a methodology of building local partnerships to identify local knowledge solutions for locally prioritized SDGs. This is only possible if higher education institutions locally adopt, adapt, take an initiative in this way. So this background is the basis for Knowledge for Change Global Consortium, which as UNESCO chair, we launched last year. We have developed a set of curriculum and a pedagogy of learning community-based participatory research. We have said those who learn this can use it to find local knowledge solutions for locally prioritized SDGs. So we have invited universities and community organizations, civil society, local government, practitioner groups to become partners in different parts of the world. Some of you have seen these copies, there are more if you like. What are we trying to do? Community-based participatory research, if it has to be relevant locally, has to be learned and taught locally. It has to be learned and taught in local language, with local idiom, with local traditions and cultures and contexts. So we have invited these partnerships to work with us and to identify a team of 3-4 mentors who are bilingual, with whom we can work, who would learn, sharpen, improve this methodology, but while learning this methodology will be producing locally relevant, contextually appropriate teaching learning methods in local language, and then use it to train the next generation of community-based participatory researchers. But each location will have to prioritize 1 or 2 SDGs. So our current partnership hubs are located in Durban region of South Africa. They have prioritized water. Colombia, where they have prioritized peace process. Indonesia, where they have focused on gender issues. In Surabaya region. There are 3 in India, different regions. One is focused on gender, another is focused on water because it's near the desert in Rajasthan. And in Italy, in Sardinia, not in mainland Italy, but in Sardinia island, where they are prioritizing local livelihood creation, local job creation, local for local economic activity, local economic development. And the mentors, first round of mentors are finishing their training in a month. They have already designed the courses that they are ready to launch. Some will launch in August, some will launch September, some will launch January. And in the process, we hope that not only several hundred new community-based participatory researchers will be trained, but a body of locally appropriate knowledge on a locally prioritized sustainable development goal would be produced in partnership, and therefore it will become knowledge in use, knowledge for change, because it is locally framed research question and appropriate methods. So that is the dream. We invite you to